We move on to the next presentation. Emanuele Fedeli from the University of Trento. We have a close also noticed. And Andrea Pietrolucci, I think, is not here. So you have the floor, please. 20 minutes, if possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you to be here in this last section. And this is a joint work with Andrea Pietrolucci. He's not here. We work in our Horizon project in Milan. The name of the project is Learn. And the idea of this paper was at the beginning just to start a co-authorship, just to work together with something about one of the pillars of the project. One of these was gender gap. So the idea is pretty simple, to map the geographical divide of the gender gap in Italy using province as boundaries, and then try to link, to analyze the association between family background, not only economic resources, but also, then I will speak a bit later, something about parenting styles and test scores. And in turn, to see what is the effect of the gender gap. Today I will start only to report some descriptive statistics about the geographical divide. I'm sorry because for the final analysis we have some issues, so we give you some just messages for what we are working on. So I don't want to repeat something that we have debated before, but also yesterday in an amazing panel that was very useful to have a complete overview of what is gender gap now in terms of research. And so we know that, as discussed before, there is the main message in the OECD countries is that we have the girls that outperform boys in reading, and the opposite it works for the boys that outperform girls in mathematics. This message works in Italy, but I can anticipate, but as we have seen before, there is some geographical divide, and this geographical divide is more pronounced when we look at the provincial level. So there is not so heterogeneity in terms of north-south, but also in east-west, and also within some areas, for instance, close in Sicily, for instance, we see that this take-home message about the trend if the boys and girls performs reciprocally in some subject reverse. So why is it important to investigate the gender gap? I agree sometimes that with the discussion that happened before or yesterday, that when we look at the scholarship, there are some stereotypes in terms of what we have to follow in terms of research. Because, for instance, as motivation, I read that sometimes it's important to study the gender gap because boys, for instance, can have a sort of problem about basic skills, so they can have an effect on short, medium, and long-term outcomes. In contrast, we have to study gender gap because girls, they are not very represented in the STEM channels. So what we do is to counterbalance different dimensions, our ideas that can explain this gender gap along the educational pipeline. So what we do is to take at the end of the day 2 courses of INVALSI from the 5th grade to the 13th grade. We observe the sample in the 8th and also in the 10th grade. What we do is to take into account other dimensions. So the first one is the family background. That can explain something that is already seen, for instance, in United States literature, that boys seem to be more affected by variation in income, low socioeconomic status compared to the girls. So if you have boys and girls with the same income level, same socioeconomic status, boys are more affected by temporary variation in the status of income. Second one is the local territories. So we can discuss about which is the best geographical unit to analyze these territorial phenomena, but we rely on province because it's an aggregated unit level. It's based on historical, structure of the Italian system. what we know from the previous literature is that, so the first one is already discussed. I think that there are two elements more important. That one is that test score doesn't measure everything. So sometimes we use test score with the assumption that can measure to a certain extent socio-emotional skills or is a proxy of behavior, but this is a strong assumption. And one of the contribution previous scholarships suggests that when we take into account test scores, the proxy of aptitude, socio-emotional skills, Big Five, the analysis changes. So we have a more in-depth overview of what happens in terms of gender gap. And then, of course, there are, when we look at some specific case studies, this is a case studies about Emilia-Romagna, but there are others, it emerges that there is a geographical divide. So at the end of the day, our goal is to identify the areas with the biggest fragility and I will show you some maps about the geographical divide using the average test score in grade 5. So this is the classical geographical divide that we observe when we adopt, when we run we use the standardized test. On the left and the right, we find language and mathematics. So 3 levels, and even if you can change or manipulate the brackets, so the geographical divide is present. So the darker is the color, the stronger is the higher in this case is the average test score in language and mathematics. We have these 2 research questions, the geographical divide and how much the gender gap is influenced by the family background. As I said before, this is the Italian school system. We follow 2 courses starting the 5th grade in the 2011 to 2012 up to the 15th grade. And we adopt some adjustment about the fact that we don't observe all students after the track enrollment. So we are not able to observe all choices of the students. We use inverse probability weighting to predict the non-observation of students that we observe in the 5th and 8th grade, but we don't observe anymore later. We use standardized test score in mathematics, in language, and some basic individual adjustment set, gender, socioeconomic background, ethnic background, natives, 2nd generation, and 1st generation. A formula, but I mean very simple. So we calculate the test score by province for male and females. The reference is female, and in the map, blue areas suggest a competitive advantage of boys. For red areas, suggest a competitive advantage of girls. Here is the gender gap over time using our course. So for Italian reading and mathematics, as you can see on the upper panel, you see that the gender gap in favor of female is pretty stable. In the bottom, you see that the gender gap in favor of boys, starting from the 5th grade up to the 15th grade, it increases. Here are the maps about so each grade. The darker is the color, the stronger is the gender gap. As you can see from all of these maps, in each province there is an advantage of girls. But you see that at the beginning, for instance, in grade 5, so before the lower secondary schools, this advantage is tiny. Then it increases with some diverging pattern between east and west. Here is about the same story about mathematics. So the gender gap is in favor of boys. But as you can see, for instance, if we start in grade 5 and then we go through grade 8, some provinces show a change. Above all in Sicily and in the south of of Italy. In grade 10 and grade 15, we don't observe the same pattern, but when we use our procedure to take into account for the attrition, we see the same story. So in the south, there is a competitive advantage of boys. Here are the results, basic results, and the next steps is to integrate the INVALSI with PISA data to proxy samples. Of course, we have to reduce so we have to modify our design because PISA data are measurable with the the students' test score, but they are cross sections, so they are measured around at the end after the track enrollment. So our idea is to use the test score in that grade as baseline and to see how some proxy of social-emotional skills, parenting styles, interaction with the parents affect the test score in 10 and the 13th grade. Our preliminary results that look only not at social norms, at proxy of social norms, but economic resources, suggest that there is a gender gap, of course, as we have seen, but the socioeconomic adverse effects are more concentrated for boys, above all in the part of the distribution where the gender gap is more present. So it looks like that boys, as in the US literature, are more affected by socioeconomic status compared to girls. Thank you.